Welcome to The Explainer. In any workplace, there's always this delicate balance, this constant push and pull between employers and employees. But what happens in a place like India when that tension finally snaps? So today, we're going to dive deep into the world of industrial disputes, from the picket lines all the way to the negotiating table, to really understand how these massive conflicts are managed and hopefully resolved. So, here's the plan. We're going to start by breaking down what a workplace dispute actually is. Then, we'll look at what happens when the talking stops and workers decide to walk out. From there, we'll open up the official rulebook for how these things get settled. And after that, we'll shift to a much more proactive strategy, the art of the deal, before finally looking at the real-world challenges that stand in its way.
This really gets to the heart of it, right? We're not talking about a small disagreement over the coffee machine. We're talking about fundamental, deep-seated issues that can literally paralyze an entire company, or sometimes even a whole industry. So how on earth do you manage conflict on that kind of scale?
To figure out how to solve these problems, we first have to know what we're talking about. What exactly is an industrial dispute in the eyes of the law? Let's get a clear definition. And the official definition? Well, it is incredibly broad. It covers pretty much any disagreement you can think of that's related to a job. We're talking pay, benefits, hiring, firing, all the way down to the physical safety of the workplace. Basically, if it's about the work or the place you do the work, it can become a formal dispute.
Now it gets a little more specific. Disputes are generally broken down into two key types. You have interest disputes, which are all about creating new rights. Think of a union demanding a pay raise for the next contract. And then you have rights disputes, which are about enforcing the rights you already have, like an employee who gets fired unfairly. It's really the difference between writing the rule book and calling out a foul when someone breaks the rules.
But what happens when these disputes, whether they're about new interests or existing rights, just can't be solved with a conversation? What happens when one side feels like their only option left is to stop working entirely? And that, of course, leads us to the strike. It is the most powerful and visible tool in the workers' arsenal. It's a huge signal that negotiations have completely failed, and it's a collective refusal to work until demands are heard. It forces everyone to pay attention. But here's the thing. A strike isn't just one single action. It's a tactic that can take many different forms. You've got your sit-down strike, where workers physically occupy the space. A go slow is more subtle. They're working, but productivity just plummets. And a wildcat strike? That's when things explode without any official union approval. Each one is a strategic choice meant to have a very specific impact.
Okay, so faced with the possibility of this massive disruption, it makes total sense that India would establish a formal legal framework to try and manage these conflicts before they spin completely out of control.
And the absolute cornerstone of this whole framework is the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947. Think about that timing. This law was passed right as India was gaining its independence. It created the official machinery for settling disputes that, believe it or not, is still largely in use today.
So what this act did was create something that's almost like a special justice system just for the workplace. The whole process is tiered. It starts with a conciliation officer who tries to mediate a friendly agreement. If that doesn't work, things can escalate up through a board, a court of inquiry, and finally to specialized labor courts or tribunals that actually have the power to make legally binding decisions.
You can think of this framework as having two different toolkits. On the left, you have the statutory measures. These are the legally binding ones, like going to court. But on the right, you have the non-statutory or voluntary measures. These rely on everyone agreeing to participate. And the most important voluntary tool of all is collective bargaining.
And this is where we really pivot. We're moving away from just having a referee step in when there's a fight, and we're moving towards a much more proactive, more collaborative approach, where both sides actually try to write the rules of the game together.
This quote just nails the whole philosophy, doesn't it? Instead of just getting really good at putting out fires, the goal of modern industrial relations is to create a workplace where those fires are just way less likely to ever start.
And that prevention strategy is called collective bargaining. It's a formal process where representatives for the employees and the employers sit down at the table as equals and they negotiate a contract. And this agreement can cover everything: wages, hours, safety, you name it.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, it promotes what's called industrial democracy. This idea that workers should have a real say in the conditions they work under. It creates clear, uniform rules for everybody, which protects workers' interests while giving employers the stability and predictability they need to run a business.
But while collective bargaining sounds great in theory, it's the ideal, right?
The reality on the ground in India is, well, it's a lot more complicated. Making this process work effectively comes with its own set of pretty significant hurdles. There are a few key things that really get in the way. For one, having multiple competing unions can actually fracture the workers' voice and weaken their bargaining power. Then there's the fact that the government can step in and force a decision, which can make both sides less willing to compromise on their own. And finally, some unions might just be too weak or too influenced by outside politics to be truly effective negotiators.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question for the future. As India's economy continues to transform, the old rules of work are constantly being rewritten. The real challenge, then, isn't just about the laws on the books, but about fostering a true culture of negotiation and trust. So, what's it going to take to finally make collaboration the rule and not the exception?